The scratching came first, quiet, uneven, almost hesitant. Lieutenant Ben Harlow blinked at the station door, unsure if he was imagining things. It was 4:47 a.m. in Autumn Ridge, and Firehouse 27 was dead quiet. The kind of quiet that made even the creak of a chair sound like thunder. Maya Brooks, the youngest firefighter on shift, was half asleep across the table, nursing a cup of stale coffee. She lifted her head, eyes heavy. "You hear that?" Ben asked, already moving toward the front. "Hear what?" "That." He pointed. The scratching again, more insistent this time. And then a whine, low, raw. It was the sound of something not just hurting, but pleading. Ben unlocked the heavy door and pulled it open. The outside light buzzed, casting a dim amber glow across the concrete step. And there, standing on trembling legs, was a German shepherd, matted, limping, and panting hard. Ben's breath caught. Not because of the dog's condition, although its ribs showed through its muddy coat and blood smeared its right paw, but because of what was in its mouth. A child's sneaker. White, with a faded pink stripe, and laces knotted tightly. Drenched in blood. The dog dropped it at his boots, then looked up and barked. Just once. Sharp. Urgent. Maya was beside him now, silent. Her hand went to her chest, eyes locked on the sneaker. "Jesus," she whispered. Ben crouched. The sneaker was small. Maybe a kid's size 4. There was no mistaking the thick, dark stains on the toe. "This isn't random," he muttered. "It's like—" He trailed off, staring into the dog's eyes. They were wild, but not lost. Focused. Desperate. "It wants us to follow," Maya said softly. "Ben, look at its face." The dog had already turned, limping down the steps, pausing just long enough to glance back. Ben grabbed his radio. "Dispatch, this is Engine 27. We're heading into the woods behind Mill Creek Road. Unconfirmed situation. We'll report status." He looked at Maya. "Grab the med bag." "You sure about this?" Ben's jaw clenched. "Number, but that dog didn't drag a bloody shoe here for fun." They loaded up the old forest response truck. The dog, against every regulation they had, leapt into the cab and sat in the passenger seat, shivering but alert. Eyes fixed forward. It didn't make a sound for the entire 10-minute ride. The town gave way to treeline quickly. The farther they drove, the more overgrown the road became. Mill Creek had been closed for years, ever since the wildfire. The forest beyond was a graveyard. Charred trunks, twisted stumps, forgotten trails. No one went there anymore. At the end of the path, the dog jumped down and took off into the woods. "You've got to be kidding," Maya muttered, shouldering the med kit. Ben followed without a word. It was eerie. Quiet in that way the forest sometimes is, where even the birds feel like they're holding their breath. They followed the dog for about a quarter mile. Twigs snapping underfoot, fog hugging the ground. Then it stopped. A small clearing, barely visible, and in the center, partially hidden beneath a pile of leaves and broken limbs, something moved. Ben rushed forward and dropped to his knees, brushing the debris away. A hand. Pale. Scratched. Trembling. "Help," came a whisper, so faint he thought he'd imagined it. Maya was already on the radio. "Dispatch, this is Firehouse 27. We have a female, approximately early 20s, found semi-conscious, head trauma, possible exposure. Requesting EMS backup ASAP. We are 2 miles southeast of Mill Creek burn line. Coordinates coming." Ben eased the woman onto her side. Her face was bloodied, a deep gash above her eyebrow caked in dirt. Her lips were cracked from cold and dehydration. "Ma'am," he said gently, "can you hear me?" Her eyelids fluttered. "Please." "There's another one." Ben froze. "Another what?" "A child. Deeper in—" She started to sob weakly. Maya's eyes met his. "Ben." He didn't speak. He turned to the dog. It was already staring back at them, its ears perked, tail twitching. No bark this time, just a look that said, "We're not done yet." The medics arrived just as the woman slipped back into unconsciousness. Maya gave a quick briefing before turning to Ben. "You're thinking what I'm thinking." Ben nodded. "We keep going." He picked up the flashlight from his belt, checked his radio. Dead. Too far out. Maya adjusted her pack. Following a wounded stray dog into a burned forest looking for a possibly abducted kid. "We're really doing this?" Ben gave her a tired half-smile. "That shoe didn't walk itself to our door." They plunged back into the woods, the German shepherd leading the way, limping still, but with purpose. Like it was retracing steps it knew by heart. The ground turned soft with moss. Every so often Ben spotted a small disturbance. A snapped branch, a smear of mud. Evidence of something, or someone, being dragged. "Who the hell is this dog?" Maya whispered at one point. Ben didn't answer. He had the same question. An hour passed, then 2. And just when they thought they'd lost the trail entirely, the dog stopped again. Dead still, nose in the air. Ben stepped up beside it. There, ahead in the low morning light, was the outline of something large and crooked. A structure, slouched against the trees. "What is that?" Maya murmured. Ben squinted. "An old shack?" The dog growled. It wasn't loud, but it wasn't fear. It was warning. He looked back at Maya. "You ready?" "No," she said. "But let's go anyway." They hadn't even opened the door yet, and both of them could feel it. The shift. Like the forest itself was holding its breath again. Whatever waited beyond that shack door, one thing was certain. This was far from over. 3 days earlier. The sun was just beginning to dip behind the trees in Autumn Ridge, casting long shadows over the backyard of the Sanders home. Lila Sanders stood at the kitchen sink, humming softly as she rinsed off a cutting board. From the window, she could see her daughter, Emily, twirling in the golden light. Her stuffed Dalmatian, Toby, clutched in one hand, spinning with her. The girl's laugh floated through the glass. Lila smiled and turned toward the stove. Dinner could wait 5 more minutes. She barely made it to the hallway when the phone rang. Her sister, Dana, calling from Idaho. Lila hesitated, glancing toward the window again. Emily was fine. Just a quick chat. 4 minutes later, when Lila returned, the yard was empty. The stuffed toy lay abandoned in the grass. The gate was ajar. Her scream cracked the air like a thunderclap. Back in the forest. Present day. The shack was old. Rotting. The door creaked on its hinges as Ben pushed it open, releasing a waft of mildew, rust, and something sourer. The German shepherd sat outside the threshold, refusing to step in. Inside, Maya swept her flashlight across the room. Dust danced in the beams of light. The space was small. Just one room. No furniture except a metal chair bolted to the floor. A bucket in the corner. And something else. "Jesus," Maya whispered. On the ground lay a coiled rope, darkened with old stains. Near it, a blue sneaker. Small, child-sized. Cartoon print faded on the side. Blood smeared across the toe. Ben crouched, lifting the sneaker gently. "Same style as the one the dog brought us. This one's smaller." Maya's stomach twisted. "It's a girl's." Ben nodded grimly. "We're looking for a kid." The dog let out a low growl. Its ears perked. It was staring behind the shack, into the dark trees. "You hear something?" Maya asked. Ben held up a hand for silence. Then, a twig snapped. Both turned toward the sound, but it was already gone. Silence returned, heavy and unnatural. "Let's not stick around," Ben said, tightening his grip on the flashlight. "This place feels wrong." Back outside, the shepherd had already moved to the side of the structure. Its nose was to the ground, tracing something invisible. Maya adjusted the radio on her vest. Still nothing. "We're in a black zone," Ben muttered. "Too deep." They followed the dog again, moving deeper into the forest. Ben glanced at the shack once more before turning away. Whatever had happened in there wasn't the end of the story. Just another echo of something darker. Later that night, as they paused for water near a dry creek bed, Maya sat back against a rock and stared at the stars flickering through the branches. "You know," she said quietly, My uncle used to talk about this dog. Ben looked up. He worked at the town's animal control center years ago. Said a German shepherd escaped during a domestic disturbance. Belonged to a woman named Rachel. She'd reported her boyfriend, some nutjob ex with a record. But before they could act, both the dog and the woman disappeared. Ben raised an eyebrow. No follow-up? Just blood on the trail behind their place. They searched for weeks. Nothing. They thought she ran. Said the dog probably died out there. Ben glanced at the animal resting a few feet away, still breathing hard, still refusing to quit. You think this is that dog? I don't know, Maya said. But if it is, he's been out here for years. Ben exhaled slowly, watching the dog twitch in his sleep. Waiting for someone to listen. Flashback. 72 hours earlier. Emily had always been bright, full of questions, curious about everything. She didn't talk to strangers. Lila made sure of that. But the man wasn't a stranger, at least not entirely. He said he'd met Lila at the store. Said he had puppies. He was nice, soft-spoken. He knew her name. Emily followed him only to the gate. Then, when she hesitated, he smiled and held up something, a stuffed Dalmatian. It looked just like Toby. That was the last thing she remembered before the world went dark. Back in the present. The trail twisted through a thick stand of pines. Branches clawed at their jackets. The dog stopped abruptly and barked, once, then moved again. They reached a narrow gully where something hung from a branch. Maya climbed up first and unhooked the fabric. It was a child's sweater. Torn. Drenched in morning dew. And something darker. Jesus, she whispered. Pink, cartoon rabbits. Ben, this is fresh. He nodded, jaw tight. We're getting closer. Suddenly the dog let out a low rumble. Its ears turned toward the west. It began walking, limping still, but faster. Maya followed. They crested a small ridge. Below, half hidden in the overgrowth, stood another structure, much smaller. Not a cabin, not even a shack. A storage shed, rusted roof. Padlock busted. Was this even on the map? Maya asked. Nope, Ben said, stepping carefully. Inside, it was empty except for a torn sleeping bag, food wrappers, and a name scratched into the wall. Emily. Ben, Maya called from the corner. She held something up. It was a photograph, folded, wrinkled. A woman smiling with a German shepherd. On the back, me and Axel, always together. Love, Rachel. Ben stared. It's her. Which means the dog, he's Axel. Maya knelt next to him. She trusted him. She must have died nearby, and he stayed. Ben didn't respond. He looked at Axel, who stood at the threshold of the shed, tail low, watching the forest like it might breathe. As night fell, the air turned colder. Maya checked her watch. We've been out here almost 15 hours. Ben rubbed his eyes. We keep going. We're close. They sat in silence for a moment, the woods pressing in around them. Then Maya asked, almost to herself, You think a dog could really remember? Ben looked at Axel, who hadn't slept since they started. I think he never forgot. A gust of wind rolled through the trees, carrying with it a distant sound, like movement. A shuffle. Something human. Axel stood, eyes fixed on the darkness. Ben stood too. Let's move. And just like that, they were running again. After a dog who had already seen too much but wasn't done yet. The trail narrowed into a trench of gnarled roots and brambles. The deeper they went, the quieter it got. No birdsong, no rustling leaves, just the steady crunch of boots on cold earth and the uneven shuffle of Axel's paws ahead. The forest seemed to pull in around them, shadows thickening with every step. Maya wiped a line of sweat from her brow despite the cold. It's like this place doesn't want to be found. Ben didn't answer. He was focused on the German shepherd, who limped forward with unwavering precision. The dog didn't pause, didn't hesitate. It moved like it knew exactly where it was going, like it had walked this path 100 times before, in dreams, in memory, or both. Suddenly Axel stopped. Ben froze mid-step. What is it? The dog's ears were forward, nose twitching. Then, as if making a decision, Axel turned sharply to the left and began pushing through dense underbrush. They followed, branches clawing at their jackets. Maya winced as a thorn caught her forearm. Then came the ridge, a steep slope, overgrown and slick with moss. Axel bounded down without warning. Ben muttered, "Here we go," and started after him. Halfway down, he heard Maya slip. He turned in time to see her flailing, boots sliding on the loose earth. "Hold on!" But it wasn't Ben who caught her. Axel, somehow faster despite his limp, latched onto the back of Maya's jacket with his teeth. He didn't pull hard, just enough to slow her fall and steady her footing. She landed with a grunt and turned in disbelief. The dog let go and stepped back, panting. "You just saved my ass," she whispered. Ben helped her up. "You good?" She nodded, staring at Axel. "Yeah, thanks to him." The ravine opened into a narrow clearing, barely wider than a living room. A circle of broken trees surrounded it, the ground flat and cleared in a way that felt unnatural. Axel stopped at the edge. Then, slowly, his head lowered. His body tensed. Ben followed his gaze. There, beneath a twisted elm, was a girl. She was tied to the base of the tree with frayed rope, her knees scraped and bleeding, her small frame trembling. She couldn't have been older than 8. Her socks were mismatched, her jeans torn. Her face was dirty, her eyes wide with terror. "Emily." Maya gasped. And standing over her, his back turned, hands twitching at his sides, was a man in a gray hoodie. Travis Knox. Ben saw the blade in his right hand before he saw the madness in his eyes. "Drop the knife!" Ben shouted, drawing his service weapon. The man didn't turn. His voice was low, muttering. "She said someone would come. I told her the dog remembers. They never believed me. But she knew." "Hands where I can see them," Ben barked. Travis turned slowly, his expression blank. His eyes, those were not the eyes of a sane man. They were flat, distant. He wasn't here, not fully. He looked at the gun, then at Axel, and he smiled. "You remember me, don't you, boy?" Axel's growl started low, deep in his chest, and rose with each second. Then he lunged. It was a blur of fur and fury. The German shepherd hit Travis square in the chest, knocking him back. The knife flew from his hand and skittered across the dirt. "Go!" Ben yelled. Maya was already moving. She dropped to her knees beside Emily, sawing through the ropes with her rescue blade. "You're okay now, sweetheart," she said, her voice trembling. "You're safe." The girl didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just clung to Maya, her tiny hands gripping the firefighter's coat with white-knuckled desperation. Axel stood over Travis, teeth bared, growling low. The man writhed beneath him, groaning. Ben kicked the knife away and slammed a knee into Travis's back. "You're done," he growled, snapping the cuffs tight. "You're done hurting anyone else." Maya scooped Emily into her arms. The girl pressed her face into Maya's chest, silent tears soaking through her uniform. Axel limped over and rested his head against Emily's side. She looked down at him. Her fingers, still trembling, reached out and touched his muzzle. "He said the dog would come," she whispered. "He promised me." Ben's heart clenched. He turned toward Maya. "Get her out of here. Radio for evac." "Already did. They're 5 minutes out." Ben hauled Travis to his feet. "You're going to rot for this." But the man just chuckled. "She wasn't the first, you know," he said. "She was just the last one who looked like her." Ben shoved him toward a tree and forced him down. "Don't talk." Maya wrapped Emily in a thermal blanket from her pack. The girl didn't speak again, just stared at the dog who lay beside her, tail twitching faintly. When the paramedics arrived, they took Travis into custody and loaded Emily into the back of the ambulance. She gripped Axel's collar until the very last second, when the paramedic gently guided her hand away. Axel tried to jump in after her. Maya stopped him. "It's okay," she said, kneeling. "You did it." The dog's eyes locked on hers, tired, wild, but somehow calm. "He's not just a stray," she whispered. "He's a soldier." Ben stood beside her, arms crossed. He remembered. Maya nodded. "And because of that, she's alive." The ambulance doors shut with a heavy click. As the lights faded into the trees, Axel turned and looked back into the forest. Not with fear, with unfinished business. The crime scene tape fluttered weakly in the morning breeze, stretched across the clearing like a barrier between the living and the unspeakable. Ben stood just beyond it, arms folded, jaw clenched, watching as a team of forensic techs worked in near silence. Behind them, 2 sheriff's deputies guarded the entrance to the ravine, where it had all unraveled the night before. Travis Knox had been taken into custody without resistance after the attack. If anything, he'd seemed eerily satisfied, like something inevitable had finally happened. "He told me someone would come for her," Emily had whispered in the ambulance, "that the forest would help, that the dog remembered." At the time, it hadn't made much sense. But now, as Ben stared down at the patch of disturbed earth near the tree line, ropes, tattered cloth, a woman's shoe half buried in dirt, it all began to align. Emily had survived, but someone else hadn't. They found the bones at dawn, buried shallow beneath an uprooted pine, less than 40 feet from where Emily had been tied. What was left of the body had been wrapped in a faded blue sweater, the kind sold at roadside thrift shops, and tucked gently into a fetal position. Like someone had cared, even if only for a moment. It was Maya who uncovered the first sign, a scrap of leather with a tarnished dog tag buried beside the remains. She picked it up carefully, brushing away the dirt. The name engraved on the worn metal read, Axel. She turned to Ben, her voice hoarse. "It's his." Ben took the tag, eyes scanning the curve of the letters. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. They confirmed the identity 2 days later. Rachel Knox, 33. Missing for over 5 years. Reported last seen arguing with her ex-boyfriend Travis on the porch of a rundown cabin 10 miles outside Autumn Ridge. At the time, she'd been dismissed as a runaway. No body, no forced entry, just a trail of blood behind the cabin, and a missing dog. The file had gathered dust in a drawer. Another cold case, another forgotten woman, but not forgotten by everyone. Back at the firehouse, Axel lay curled on a thick blanket by the engine bay door, his head resting on his good paw, the other bandaged. He hadn't moved much since they'd returned. Wouldn't eat. Barely drank. Maya sat beside him now, holding the dog tag in her hand. She'd cleaned it, strung it on a thin cord, and looped it gently around his neck. "You stayed," she murmured. "All this time, you stayed." The dog didn't lift his head, but his tail thumped once. Ben entered, holding a manila folder. "They found something else." Maya looked up. "What?" "Animal control record, from 5 years ago. Apparently, Axel was scheduled for evaluation after failing his final K9 obedience exam. They said he was too headstrong, too independent." She snorted. "That's one way of putting it." "They listed him as a potential therapy dog. Rachel adopted him the next month." Maya's voice lowered, and then disappeared. Ben nodded. "Travis was brought in for questioning, but they didn't have enough. No witnesses, no physical evidence. He moved towns within a year, changed his name in a neighboring county, laid low until he took Emily." Ben walked over to Axel and crouched. "You tried to tell us back then, didn't you?" The shepherd didn't respond, just blinked slowly. Maya sighed. "You know what this means, right? That dog led us back to the body of his owner after 5 years. No tracking collar, no training orders, nothing but memory." Ben stood. He didn't stay because he was lost. He stayed because she was. That afternoon, Emily returned to the firehouse with her mother. She was still pale, still quiet, but her eyes lit up the moment she saw the dog. Axel lifted his head, then slowly, achingly, got to his feet. The girl ran to him, throwing her arms around his neck. "I knew you'd come," she whispered. Her mother knelt beside them, tears streaking her cheeks. Thank you. Thank you so much. Axel nuzzled Emily gently, then settled beside her, content to simply be close. Ben watched from a distance, a lump in his throat. He turned to Maya. She said something in the ambulance. Emily. About Travis. Yeah? She said he kept talking to himself. Said she reminded him of someone. That the dog would remember. Maya's brow furrowed. So he knew Axel would come. Ben nodded. I think he wanted him to. Why? I don't know. Maybe guilt. Maybe madness. Maybe he knew he didn't bury everything as deep as he thought. The town reacted quickly. The sheriff reopened Rachel's case. Travis Knox was officially charged not only with Emily's abduction and attempted murder, but now, second-degree homicide for Rachel's death. The DA moved fast. No jury was likely to look kindly on a man who'd tied an 8-year-old to a tree and left her in the dark. Travis showed no emotion in his arraignment, no remorse. He just sat there, blank and distant, eyes half-lidded, as though waiting for a sentence he'd already handed himself years ago. But outside the courtroom, something else was happening. A different kind of justice. Axel's story had spread. On the 5th night after Emily's rescue, candles lined the sidewalk outside Firehouse 27. Handwritten notes, small shoes, drawings of dogs. One child had left a folded piece of paper with crayon lettering that read, "You didn't forget, so we won't either." Inside, Maya clipped the original dog tag to a bulletin board in the engine bay. Above it, she pinned a photo of Rachel, smiling, arm draped around a younger Axel in front of a forest trail. Ben joined her, a fresh cup of coffee in hand. He's not sleeping well, she said. Neither am I, he admitted. I keep thinking about it. How many nights did he lie out there, waiting, watching? Ben looked over at Axel, who was curled up again by the garage door, facing the trees beyond. I think, Ben said softly, he never left, because part of him was still with her. Back there. Maya nodded. The place he never left. They stood in silence for a long time. Outside, the wind rustled through the trees, and just beyond the fence, Axel opened his eyes and watched. Still. Waiting. Remembering. The ceremony was quiet, but the emotion in the air was anything but. A modest crowd had gathered in the town square of Autumn Ridge. Neighbors, firefighters, teachers, even strangers who had followed the story from nearby counties. The mayor stood behind a wooden podium, his voice warm but solemn. We are here not only to honor a rescue, he said, but a resilience. Not just of a child, but of something that goes beyond training, beyond instinct. Something we all hope to recognize someday in ourselves. Loyalty without condition. Courage without command. Behind him, a makeshift banner stretched across the firehouse wall. Axel, the dog who remembered. Ben stood just off to the side with Maya, both in their station jackets. And in front of them sat Axel, his coat now clean, his eyes alert but soft. A small custom vest had been fitted to his chest, the firehouse's emblem stitched on one side. A boy in the crowd whispered, "That's him." And a hush fell over the group. Emily stepped forward, her little hand holding tightly to a folded piece of paper. She wore a pale yellow dress and a red scarf that fluttered gently in the wind. The same scarf Axel had once tugged playfully during their first walk after the rescue. The girl looked up at the crowd, then down at Axel, then unfolded the note. Dear Axel, she began softly. Thank you for finding me. For not giving up. For remembering when everyone else forgot. She turned and knelt beside him, slipping a ribboned medal from a small box and gently looping it around his neck. You're my hero, she whispered, then pressed her forehead to his. The crowd clapped, but not loudly. It was the kind of applause that's born from reverence, not celebration. Ben stepped up to the mic next. He didn't bark for attention, he said. He barked for justice. And when no one listened the first time, he came back anyway. For 5 years this dog lived alone in a forest because he refused to forget. He paused, then added, That's more than loyalty. That's love. Axel didn't care for crowds, and he didn't stay long. That night, after the last guest had gone home and the firehouse lights dimmed, he curled up in his usual spot by the bay door. Maya found him there and sat down beside him, 2 mugs of cocoa in her hands. She didn't say much, just sipped quietly and looked out into the dark. "You're not a stray anymore," she finally said. "You're family now." Axel's tail thumped once. Over the following weeks, Autumn Ridge slowly returned to its rhythms, but something subtle had shifted. People walked their dogs a little farther, looked their neighbors in the eye a little longer. Kids stopped by the firehouse on Saturdays just to peek in and maybe catch a glimpse of the hero dog. The firehouse turned an old supply room into Axel's corner, complete with a cot, a window, and a plaque that read, "Axel, the one who remembered." Emily visited often, always with a new drawing tucked in her backpack. Her parents said she was smiling more now, laughing again, sleeping through the night. One of her drawings showed Axel standing in front of a dark forest, tail raised, blocking the path like a guardian. She titled it, "The Dog Who Waited for the Wind to Change." It was a Sunday morning in late November when something changed. Maya arrived early, as always, to check on him. But Axel wasn't waiting at the door. His blanket was untouched. She found him instead at the tree line just behind the station, sitting quietly, gazing into the woods like he used to. The sun had barely risen, but the sky glowed faintly pink. Maya crouched beside him, resting a hand on his back. "You thinking about her?" she asked. He didn't move. "You don't have to stay anymore, you know. You've done more than enough." Axel turned his head slowly. Then, almost imperceptibly, he leaned his weight into her hand just for a moment. And then he stood, limped gently back to the station door, and lay down. 3 weeks later, the first snow fell. The crew found him curled in his bed that morning, his breathing soft and deep. Peaceful. He didn't wake when they called his name. Didn't twitch at the sound of boots or the clang of the engine bay door. Maya touched his side gently. Still warm. Still whole. But gone. Ben knelt beside her, eyes stinging. He waited until she was okay, he said quietly. "Until we all were," Maya added. They buried Axel at the edge of the woods, beneath a tall pine that overlooked the trail he'd walked so many times. A simple stone marker read, "Axel, the one who returned." The one who remained. Emily laid the red scarf across the grave. She didn't cry. She stood tall and whispered, "Thank you for remembering me. I'll remember you too." A month later, the town opened Memory Grove, a park built where the woods once carried only fear. At its heart was a bench beneath that pine tree. Children came to read, to draw, to sit quietly. One trail, Axel's trail, led into the trees, marked by paw prints carved into the stones. It didn't lead anywhere specific, just forward. The video of Axel's ceremony, filmed by a firefighter's teenage son, went viral within days. No fancy editing, no music, just a clip of Emily placing the medal around Axel's neck and whispering, "You found me." The internet responded in waves. Axel the hero dog trended for weeks. Letters poured in from across the country. Parents wrote to say their children weren't afraid of dogs anymore. Veterans said Axel reminded them of their own partners long gone. A shelter in Maine renamed its adoption center Axel's House. But the story that stayed with Maya the most came in the form of a letter. Handwritten, simple. 42 years on the force. I've known brave men, brave dogs, but never one who led us not with his teeth or his training, but with his heart. Axel remembered what we tried to forget, and that made all the difference. R. Dalton, retired deputy sheriff, Tennessee. Sometimes Maya still wakes early and walks to the edge of the tree line. She sits on the bench and listens to the wind in the branches. And she swears sometimes when the morning is quiet enough. She hears a soft thump in the leaves behind her, like a tail, wagging, waiting, remembering.